welcome back to Office Hours. I am your host, Roy Kent. And today, don't shake at my dad jokes. Anyway, so I'm Marc Goldberg, CRO of Method Media Intelligence. We have Shailin Dhar, CEO and founder, as well as Jenny Wilkins, marketing strategist. Today, we're going to talk about pre-bid, post-bid. And what I will say is we got a lot of great responses from everybody, both internally and externally. Thank you. So let's talk about real-time bidding, blocking for invalid traffic, as well as brand safety and suitability. This is the actual topic today, and I'm going to let Jenny take it away.
Yeah, so before we jump in, can you unpack a bit for me and the viewers, hello viewers, what pre-bid blocking is? They
Sure. If you think about the DSPs, which we talk about, demand-side platforms, they're looking at all the bid requests. And if they or a technology sees that something is invalid, it will prevent a bid response. And so they're stopping it from actually responding.
And so then, to be clear on the terminology, when you say invalid traffic or IVT, you mean non-human traffic, correct?
Invalid traffic is more of a industry term rather than a kind of technical term. It encompasses all different types of traffic that are not valid for monetization. And one of those things is non-human traffic. It can also include stacked ads where, within an ad frame, there's multiple actual ad tags loading, but you only actually see one as a user, and lots of other different categories that are outlined by the MRC.
Great, thanks so much for clarifying on that. So then, why do people tend to use pre-bid blocking for IVT or invalid traffic?
Well, I think honestly it's easy, and it seems easy. I think in their mind it prevents the billing issues that they see downstream. But I think, why we like to talk about it is because it's not entirely effective just doing pre-bid alone. And that's why we like this topic a lot. I've written many articles at Exchanger, a couple others. It's actually, I would say, the easy button.
The reason, to talk about the effectiveness, the reason that it's less effective than post-bid filtration is that you're not actually doing measurement in a pre-bid context. All you're doing is looking at information that's been declared in a bid request by a seller, and just doing filtration based on certain parameters within that. So that's the reason that it's less effective. It's not really a debate in that sense. It's, there is no measurement in a pre-bid context. You're filtering based on certain declared parameters. And on the topic of billing, we've been talking about this a lot internally. CPM is that price unit that gets applied to any pre-bid filtration, but that M is not the number of ad impressions that you serve. It's not the number of auctions that you win. It's the number of bid responses you actually send back. So if you actually win, the opportunity to serve 100 impressions, let's say your win rate is only 50%, you've actually paid for 200 bid responses to be verified, even though you're actually only serving 100 ads.
The RTB protocols really allow for real quick decisions to be made, and it's limited by some signals. And these signals, there's RTB protocol specs are on the IB. Those two signals that really have been led by for IVT are IP address and user agent. And both of these, they can be spoofed. They can provide false positives. If you think it's a cell phone tower and you mark it invalid once, it's invalid forever. There are a lot of little nuances around pre-bid. And I also want to go back and say, pre-bid is not entirely ineffective. There are some good usage, but if you're just reliant on it, that to me is a bigger issue. And so the billing, you want to just jump back into the billing?
Well, I also kind of wanted to clarify a bit on RTB protocol and make sure that I'm understanding it fully. So RTB protocol, it's the rule set within the RTB, a network of ad requests that ultimately delivers to an ad to the device. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So
I couldn't have said it that concisely.
Amazing. So then I guess
You've
how
arrived,
is it?
Jenny. You've arrived.
Have I? Ugh, it fills my heart. But so then how are they spoofed? I'm not totally clear on how that happens.
So again, it goes back to that point about it not being measurement. So if you think about a bid request, it's essentially this kind of template form that a seller is filling out with the requested information. What website is it on? You know, what is the IP address of the user? What type of device are they using? What browser are they using? Information about the content, whatever the, the same way you fill out any form, you can choose to, if you filled out a form and it says name, you as Jenny Wilkins have full ability to write my name in there. And now that form is, to a person that doesn't know either of us, that form is with my information because you put my name instead of yours. All the other information could be yours, but you put that in the name section. And that's all spoofing really is in a pre-bid context, because it's declaration by the seller. It's not based on actual measurement. It's not like somebody came and said, which one of you is Jenny, which one of you is Shailin, and then had to figure it out. It's just what was written on a form. And that's where that, spoofing sounds a little bit more sophisticated than it actually is. It's very basic form of just passing false information.
So I've been hearing a lot about false positives popping up occasionally. So can you tell me what is meant by a false positive?
Yeah, in the verification context, a false positive is when it's a legitimate human initiated event that's valid for monetization, but it gets flagged as invalid by a verification process. False negative would be something like Marc identified earlier about the IP address, where a cell tower IP address has been flagged as perpetually invalid, so that all new events, even if they're human initiated, coming from that IP address get marked as invalid or robotic. And so that's a false positive. False positive is it's human, but somebody says it's robotic. False negative is it's robotic, but somebody allows it through because it has signals suggesting that it's human initiated.
Got it. Okay. So to be completely honest, I feel like this isn't casting pre-bid in like the most positive light. So I kind of wonder, like, I know Marc was saying that pre-bid isn't bad, but how is it not?
It's bad when that's the only thing you have in place.
Yeah, I mean, again, there's flaws, but those flaws get, when you have post bid or you're using other things alongside maybe a curated list of different domains, there are a lot of ways to complement and supplement pre-bid, but standalone, there's just too many flaws. And I think most media buyers don't understand those flaws and think they have this protection. And in my article, I use this little bit of fence. That's one part of the fence here, but there's a whole house that yard. It's just a little thing, but you can go around it. And that's the flaw.
So Marc, you're saying post bid is where it's at then?
Yeah. Post bid pre-render is where we generally sit. So it's before the ad has served, but we still, as a third party, have the ability to do proper measurement of the environment where the ad is being delivered and not just rely on what a seller is declaring to do our decisioning. And that is important because where you sit in that chain of events is important, because every customer and every party in this system has different billable events, or what they count as the event that they can bill their customers on. So a DSP is billing on the number of auctions they win. For that pre-bid verification, their billable event is a bid response. And so those are the, it's not all CPMs apply to actual ad impressions, even though the word impression gets used by probably too many people at different stages.
Yeah, because I was actually going to ask what constitutes a billable event, but I guess what you're saying is it's different for each party that's involved. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
even after the auction is won by a DSP, there's the request to the ad server. Then the ad server actually, is delivering the ad. The creative downloads, so that image or video file actually downloads onto the web property or the user's device. And then after that is another process for actually beginning the rendering of that image or video. So there's lots of different stages that oftentimes we overlook when we're looking at the big picture.
And I would just add, always ask, what is my billable event? That is something not enough advertisers and buyers are doing. And they really need to ask that question. What's my billable event on this? Because if they don't know, that's a shame. But if they learn, then they can optimize accordingly.
It makes it easier to navigate discrepancies also, because people see discrepancies all the time between their different systems. DSP is saying 1,000 impressions and the ad server is only showing 800. What happened to the 200? If you're clear on what event they're actually counting for billing, then it becomes a bit more clear.
Let's switch speeds here a bit and kind of like look at this big picture. So say I want to use pre-bid, only I just won't bid on what I think is not human, and I'm billed for whatever ends up running. But for brand safety, I'm blocking where I don't want to be. What would be the flaws in this kind of approach for safety and suitability?
So going back to the RTB protocols, there are a set of signals that they can only see. And some of these signals are declared, self-declared, to be honest. What they say is a sports site actually could be an adult content site. So some of this stuff is actually too soft in that it's just declared. But also the URL is the most important part in brand safety and pre-bid, in that they're looking at the URL, and the URL has, that little thing up at the top for everybody. The URL can be can only be a certain size as it gets into these systems. I'm not entirely sure what the defined sizes are, but when you have a BuzzFeed article that says, here are the top 27, like it's a huge URL, well, that gets truncated to this. And so the example I like to use is Nazi. So if the New York Times had a Nazi article saying, this person's a Nazi, he is a really, really bad person, they would only see the word Nazi. They would block that word Nazi. They would recognize that word as a bad word, assuming that's a bad word to that advertiser, and that's pre-bid block. If the article was New York Times said, what's really, really bad? This person who is actually a Nazi. That last part of Nazi never would have been seen by the pre-bid blocking technology. However, it would render post-bid, and that's a whole nother story. But that's kind of the big flaw, is pre-bid can only see a certain amount.
Wait,
It's similar to that form, right? Like when you're filling out a form, you can run out of space. And that's why URLs get truncated after a certain point, is to fit in the format and template of a bid request.
Okay, so you're saying that it's checking the URL, but not the page at all, right?
In pre-bid.
In pre-bid, okay. So then our sites, I feel like we heard this a lot at the start of the pandemic, at the height of the pandemic, and as the pandemic continues, but our sites, more specifically news sites, are they being defunded because of these keyword blocks, in your opinion?
So this is a very big problem when COVID started, because a lot of advertisers put the keyword COVID on and blocked keyword COVID. And I don't know if you read any site that you didn't see COVID, so it was really hurting, anyone who talked about the subject. But I guess this goes back to a little bit of the billable events, and goes back to a little bit of the bigger problem around brand safety tech, and that if it's looking at the URL and sees the keyword COVID, it's going to avoid that bid. And sure, you could consider that defunding, but let's get to that second. If the URL actually had COVID here, it would land on that page, and then you as a user would see a big house banner for some of the vendors and say, defunded. That's incorrect. What that is actually funded, because it passed the pre-bid technology. So pre-bid, post-bid, you won the auction. When you win the auction, you pay for something. Your decision was to run a house ad because you didn't want to be adjacent to COVID. So I guess that's the misconception a lot of people see is when they see those house ads, they say that's defunding. No, that's actually funded. That's a mistake on the tech, as well as, maybe, an advertiser should have maybe not made the word COVID such an issue. That's a whole longer story that I don't want to get into. However, I'm going to go back and say the decision on that event, when they won it, they paid for it. And that's the biggest misconception is they paid for it.
There's a lot of, it is true that ad revenue dropped last year, especially for the first, I would say 4 to 6 months, from March to September. It's easy to say, oh, it's this type of technology causing it, or this technology causing it, or brand safety checks causing it. There's a lot of different factors. Ad spend dropped across the board. We saw very, very large advertisers cut their spend by 60, 70, 80%. And when that competition just evaporates from the demand side, you will just see CPMs go down across the board. And it wasn't that there weren't advertisers. There were still lots of advertising, just not from the companies maybe we're traditionally used to. Zoom probably bought a lot more digital ads. There was new businesses that popped up, a lot of e-commerce. It's not that there was less advertising, it's just the competitiveness also reduced. So that brings the prices down, especially in an automated auction-based market. And a lot of that did impact these publishers that were responsible for reporting the news.
Yeah, it wasn't mutually exclusive to have COVID as the problem. It was COVID was the bigger problem. And I think that's where the budgets got slashed and the people started to think about, oh my gosh, people are blocking COVID here. They must be blocking it so much more. And that's why we're not making ad revenue. Well, no, a lot of the ad revenue just went away. And it's unfortunate, but that's reality.
Well, Shailin, Marc, thanks for taking me through pre-bid versus post-bid. I feel like I have a new understanding of this now, thanks to chatting through it.
Thanks for having us back.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And next week or next time, we will have another guest. Stay tuned.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Bye.